IP addresses for the name servers. So the next time someone asks for an address in the surfnet.nl domain, for instance, mail.surfnet.nl, it already knows which name servers to query for this answer. So how can I attack this? Well, I'm now going to show you the Kaminsky attack in action. I have a rogue responder somewhere, and it's going to query a vulnerable resolver by asking it for a name that it knows will probably not be in the cache. So it's going to ask for a nonsense host name, so 12345.piggybank.domain. What the resolver will do is send a query to the root server and then on to the top-level domain servers, etc., to find out if they can help it along to find the answer for what is the address of 12345.piggybank.domain. The servers that it queries will tell it, well, you need to go to the piggybank authoritative name server. So it sends the piggybank authoritative name server a request which has a query ID and a source port, etc., and says to the authoritative server, can you tell me where can I find 12345.piggybank.domain? Now remember, that will not exist, but it takes some time for the authoritative server to answer. Now, at the same time, the rogue responder will be sending lots of UDP packets to the DNS resolver, supplying answers to the query that it actually sent to the resolver. So it's going to say, I know the answer for the question that you've just asked. 12345.piggybank.domain can be found at this and this address. And it will put a query ID in there. Now, as you can see, the query ID that is in the answer from the rogue responder doesn't actually match with the query that it sent to the authoritative server, so the resolver is going to discard that because that is not a valid answer. But it can send lots of packets, so the next packet will have query ID 1234 in it. That doesn't match. But then it sends a packet that matches, and what happens now is that the DNS resolver will actually accept this as a valid answer. And what is in that packet will end up in the resolver's cache. Now, you can ask me what use is it to spoof the address for 12345.piggybank.domain. That's not bad. Nobody's going to query for that. Well, what's in this answer packet is some nice additional information. What I also put in there are the name server records for the piggybank.domain zone. So I'm going to put in there that the address for ns.piggybank.domain is actually my rogue authoritative server, and that really, if you want to know something about piggybank.domain, you need to ask me and not ask the valid authoritative server. And because I beat the real authoritative server with answering the question, whatever it answers will be discarded because the resolver already has an answer. Now, what does this look like if I have a look at the answer to that query? What you can see is there's an answer, abcde.piggybank.domain. I use 1234, I think, but whatever, has an address. That's not really of any value. But I can point, in the additional section, I can point to rogue authoritative name servers, which are marked here in red. And to make matters worse, I give them a really long time to live. 604, 800 seconds is 1 week. But I could make it a year if I really wanted to. So that means that anybody who is now, as an end user, going to query this DNS resolver, and keep in mind, if that is your ISP's DNS resolver, you have a problem. It will ask, what is the address for www.piggybank.domain? Because the user wants to do some internet banking. Now, what should happen is that the DNS resolver goes to the root and TLD servers and to the proper authoritative server. But because it's already cached, the address for the name servers that are authoritative for the piggybank.domain zone, it will send a question to the rogue authoritative server. And it will say, well, you can find www.piggybank.domain at this address. And it will send that answer back to the vulnerable end user. And the worst part is the end user can't tell the difference. He can't tell that he's been given a wrong answer because it looks completely valid. It comes from the cache, it comes from its ISP resolver, it's completely trusted, it's all fine and dandy. And what will happen, what could possibly happen is that the attacker would copy the site of the bank and only, for instance, replace the link which goes to the login page for internet banking. Now that is a really nasty attack. So actually, it's even worse. I can replace the road signs for a whole domain. So I can tell everybody who wants to do business with Piggy Bank that actually all their servers are mine and really you need to talk to me and not to them. So, is it all bad? Well, as Bert, who was also in the room here, explained yesterday, DNS queries are identified using a 16-bit number. But in the past, resolvers that were querying authoritative servers used sequential numbering. So it was really, really easy to watch some traffic going on and then spoof an answer because you could very well predict which query IDs were going to be used. And even worse, the first version of Windows XP always used query ID 1, and if it had to send out a second query at the same time, it used query ID 2. But then if it was ready, you'd go back to 1, so really easy to guess. And then you can add some extra randomness to this puzzle by sending DNS queries from a random UDP port. So the attacker would also have to guess what UDP source port to put in the packet. But what if you have a network address translation firewall between your resolver and the internet? That very handy firewall will say, oh, I've got a UDP packet which I need to translate, and when the answer comes back, I need to translate it again. So what I'll do is I'll put a nice, easy to remember UDP source port number in there, say 1234. And, well, if there aren't any other UDP packets, the next time I'll use 1234 again. Really convenient. So people have been patching since Dan published his attack, have been patching their servers. I think most people on the internet now have updated their resolvers, at least they should. Check with your ISP whether they've done that, because otherwise you're vulnerable. And that's all fine and well, but people have been doing some research. If I patch a server, does that really protect me against this attack? And what they find out is, I've been talking to the guys from the Czech top-level registry who've recently rolled out DNS Sec. And they said, well, we did some tests with unpatched bind. It takes 3 seconds to poison it. And we've done some tests with a patched bind. And actually, if we have a dedicated link to it, so not a real-world situation, but anyway, if we have a dedicated link, we can actually spoof a patched server within 1 to 11 hours. And Bert in his talk yesterday showed that, well, you can really see those attacks going on because you'll be sending lots of packets to the resolver, and actually the resolver will die because you're flooding it with packets and it will just expire. But what you can do is, an attacker has all the time in the world, because remember, he can keep on sending packets, and the only thing he has to do is he has to send the one packet that makes him win. And if that takes 6 weeks, then he has a really, really good chance, by sending just 100 packets a second, to attack a resolver, and he has a 50% chance of succeeding if he does that for 6 weeks. So at this year's HAR, we had a challenge for you. We put up some posters, and there was some information on the wiki. We challenged you to hack a few resolvers that we prepared especially for you. And as Bert explained in his talk yesterday, it was very unlikely that you were going to succeed, because either our resolvers were going to expire because of the flood of packets that you were going to send over the 10 gigabit link that we have here, and otherwise something called BCP38 has been implemented, so you can't actually